Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks, the podcast crafted to enlighten individuals and businesses on the path to becoming more sustainable and socially responsible. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, and today I am thrilled to be in conversation with an inspirational leader. Clare Brook is the CEO of Blue Marine Foundation, an NGO on a mission to see at least 30% of the world's ocean under effective protection by 2030, and the other 70% managed in a responsible way. Welcome, Clare. It is so good to have you here.
Thanks very much, Sam. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. For me, it's about education, and I'm looking forward to getting inspired by you. But let's start with a bit of background about Blue Marine Foundation, about the missions and goals.
Yes, so Blue Marine is aiming to put as much of the ocean under protection as possible. So we're trying at speed to protect and replenish life in the ocean. And as you say, we're aiming for at least 30% of the ocean effectively protected. Why is that so important? Because the ocean is the world's largest carbon sink. It supplies much of the oxygen that we breathe. And the only way that it can perform those completely vital functions for our planet is thanks to the life within it. So crazily, at the moment, we're stripping the ocean of that life through overfishing. And so Blue Marine is aiming effectively to reverse that process, to challenge overfishing, to have huge areas of the ocean that are free from harmful fishing, and where necessary to actually actively replenish life through restoration work.
Yeah. And for you, how did you get involved? I know you've been with Blue Marine Foundation for a long time, but what inspired the creation of it, and how did you get involved in it?
So Blue Marine was set up in 2010, and it was set up off the back of a film called The End of the Line. And I really recommend everyone to watch this film. It was made in 2009, but it's still incredibly relevant today. And that film was made off the back of a book also called The End of the Line by one of our co-founders, Charles Clover. And then two of the producers of the film, George Duffield and Chris Gorrell Barnes, also co-founded Blue Marine along with Charles. And they did that because the film was a kind of surprise success. And so people were saying, but what can we do about this overfishing? No one really knew about the crisis of overfishing then. So they realized that it was necessary to set up an organization. So they set up Blue Marine. I then joined in 2014, so I've been at Blue for nearly 10 years, and it's been completely thrilling. My background was in sustainable finance, so I was working in environmental investing for years and years, and that was great fun. That was very pioneering. Certainly in the 90s and early 2000s, we were kind of achieving a huge amount. But I think it's fair to say that, you know, the achievements in sustainable finance were like nothing compared to what we've been able to achieve since I've been at Blue Marine. So it's been a very exciting journey.
Yeah, really. And I think today, certainly over the last 3 years, it's on everyone's tongue. Everybody's speaking about what we can do to be more sustainable, more socially responsible. I think people seem to care a little bit more. The goal with Blue Marine is to have at least 30% of the world's ocean under effective protection by 2030. What impact do you foresee if this target is achieved? Is it something that we're going to notice? How will we notice?
Oh, well, the whole world is now aiming to protect 30% of land and sea and inshore waters, thanks to the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was agreed in December 2022. So we now have this global target. I mean, Blue Marine has had the target of 30% of the oceans being protected by 2030 for a while, because it's agreed by scientists that if oceans are to be able to replenish the life within them, we need around a third of them to be placed under meaningful protection. But we're also very clear that you can't then just have these protected areas and then the other 70% is kind of scoured and emptied of life, so the whole ocean needs to be sustainably managed. How would we notice the difference if these targets were reached? That we would stop seeing this catastrophic decline in nature and biodiversity around the world, and that would help the climate to stabilize. So, we would stop seeing this horrific increase in global temperatures and at the same time loss of the natural world and all the animals and fish and birds that are so crucial to our whole global ecosystem. So it's incredibly important that we meet those targets. And, targets have been set, and so far we're not doing a very good job as the human race of meeting those targets. I mean, if you think we had the Paris Agreement in December 2015 that was aiming to keep global temperatures at 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now we're already going through those limits. So there's a danger that those targets are, hot air, to use the phrase rather sort of with bitter irony. So we need to see these targets met. And so Blue Marine is very focused on this 30% protection of oceans target.
Yeah, I often think there's a lot of focus on nature on land, but I don't think people realise that what oceans do and how they capture the carbon. Can you just go into that a little bit more about, because it's often missed and everyone's always talking about planting trees and protecting forests, but I think it's important to really understand that.
Yeah, you're so right, and people don't understand how it works. Climate science is very complicated, and how the action of life in the ocean works to absorb carbon is, only just beginning to be understood. So one of the things that Blue Marine is working on is the actual science around understanding how much carbon is stored on the ocean floor, for example, how it actually gets down there. And the answer is that fish play an incredibly important role in that, because they eat on the surface and then poop down. And so you've got a kind of big biological pump, that it's called, of taking the carbon from the surface and down onto the sea floor, but also the habitats that not only support the life in the ocean, but actually absorb CO2 are incredibly important. So, for example, mangroves absorb, I think, something like 15 times the amount of carbon that is absorbed by tropical forests, for example. So you've got all this, plant life and creatures in the ocean that are performing this vital function, and yet we're removing them all. So it's, kind of insanity.
Yeah, it really is. And I've watched some of your videos and definitely recommend people go and have a look and understand it even further. What do you think the main challenges are in advocating for marine protection, and how do you think that we address them?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is complacency by policymakers. So, we have a kind of governance lacuna in the oceans where we should be protecting them and we just aren't. And that's happening at a national level and at an international level. So countries need to protect their own waters better and stop overfishing their own waters, but they also need to come together to protect international waters better, because you've got a huge amount of the ocean, that about 2/3 of the ocean doesn't belong to any single country. It's effectively the high seas or areas beyond national jurisdiction. So we need to work together internationally to ensure that those are protected. And again, there's another framework that now exists as of March last year that does allow for protection on the high seas. So again, these frameworks are there, and now it's encouraging policymakers to get on and do it. So in answer to your question, we need to overcome kind of complacency, ignorance, and a desire to keep to the status quo, and ensure that we actually start to get these areas protected and stop just exploiting them. And in order to do that, I mean, people often like to blame politicians, but politicians only respond to what they think is going to get them elected. So we need to raise much more awareness, and I think it's beholden on all of us to make our politicians aware that we really care about this stuff. So, in terms of what we can all do as individuals, I would say individually use your influence in our democratic system to tell the politicians that we need to do more.
And in terms of really simple actions for individuals, is it about eating less fish or buying less of certain products? Is there something that's really in danger that we need to be more careful of?
Yes, I think first of all, educate yourself. I think when people know more about what it is that they're eating or what it is that they're doing, they tend to change their habits. So there are certain endangered species that I think people just definitely shouldn't be eating. The apex predators, for example, so swordfish, or we don't do this much here, but people who eat shark fin really need to take a look at themselves. I'm amazed that people still eat octopus, given what we know about them. They're extraordinarily intelligent, sentient creatures. A lot of the fish that is eaten in the UK, it's rather odd. We have a lot of coast, and we have some fish that is sustainably produced in the UK, like mussels in Scotland, and yet we tend to favour things like prawns brought in from the tropics, where they often come from farms where mangroves have been chopped down. So there's a massive CO2 implication of that. We eat a lot of farmed salmon, and that has some grave environmental issues associated with it. We eat stocks that are currently being overexploited, like cod and pollock. So it's not, I definitely wouldn't say to people stop eating fish, but just start thinking about which fish you eat, how it was caught, using what type of gear. Don't eat scallops that were dredged, favour hand-dived ones, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, since I saw that documentary, My Octopus Friend, it was just one of the most beautiful documentaries, and I think it really, I love watching documentaries on octopuses or short videos on them, and I think that we're learning so much more about animals and how they respond to humans. But do you do much work with local communities?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's completely crucial, because, yes, of course, there's the top-down work where you have to try and influence policy and the way that the ocean is governed overall. But at the same time, having community buy-in is so important in any area that we work. So whether it's, working in the UK in our original project that we worked on for years was in Lyme Bay in Dorset. And there it was incredibly important for us to work with the fishermen, and they created their own code of conduct that would govern the way that they fished in their own waters in a totally sustainable way. It's brilliant. But also in places like the Maldives, where we've set up a kind of sister NGO run by our colleague Shaha Hashim. And in the Dutch Caribbean, we work with local NGOs. In Mozambique, we work with the local NGOs. So it's really important that you have people on the ground who are knowledgeable, who understand the local issues, who get buy-in from people they're working with, and make sure that our interventions, which are obviously aiming to protect life in the seas, are also having a very positive impact on a local community, which will hopefully get more from the science, the capacity building, the education. For example, going back to the Maldives, one of the issues there is a lot of the women and the girls don't know how to swim. And in these low-lying islands, that's an incredibly dangerous situation. So we were working to get girls taught to swim, but also just kind of taking them into the sea and putting these snorkel masks on them. And then the girls would have a look under the water, and they'd never seen what was down there, and they'd be near a reef. So there were, lots of fish, and it's so beautiful. I'm sure you can remember the first time you saw under the waves, but the photographer captured the look on these girls' faces when they'd just kind of seen another world, right, kind of by their feet.
It's something so simple, and we don't really think about life in other areas like that and how things like that can affect them. I do remember the first time I looked underwater, and I was in Australia in the Great Barrier Reef, and just absolutely fascinating. I mean, that's some simple things, but are there some technologies that we're using?
Yes, actually, it's funny you say that, because, of course, not everyone lives by the sea, and not everyone has access to, going on wonderful diving or snorkeling holidays. So one of the technologies we're working with is virtual reality and augmented reality. So you can put on this headset, and suddenly you're kind of swimming through a kelp forest and seeing amazing creatures, kind of seals swimming about with you. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. I'm such a Luddite, so I find that sort of thing completely incredible. And what we're able to do with this, therefore, is reach, loads of school children, inner city school children, people who, don't normally have access to the sea. And so with this sort of technology, we can raise awareness about the ocean, teach people to love the ocean, and therefore, as I was saying, if more people care about the ocean, then that has a knock-on effect on politicians and how much they will actually work to protect it. So we see this as a sort of education using technology as a really important part of our work.
Yeah, I'd love to see that in schools where they have those virtual reality goggles. I think like being able to say, I've used one before, and they really are, you really feel like you can look around and see everything. And I think that way of education, I find video education really helps me to understand further. So advocating for policy change is a crucial aspect of environmental conservation. What policy changes or initiatives is Blue Marine Foundation currently advocating for?
Well, we're advocating for a huge number of policy changes, as you can imagine, but in a nutshell, we're trying to press for more marine protected areas, including on the high seas. We're trying to get those marine protected areas that exist to be actually protected. So we've got a crazy situation in the UK where it's overseas territories, places like Ascension, St Helena, Tristan da Cunha, are absolute models of marine protection, vast areas completely free from commercial fishing. And the UK has actually protected, I think, 4.3 million square kilometres of ocean. So it's incredibly impressive. By contrast, its domestic waters are supposedly protected to around 36%, but many of those marine protected areas are actually not protected. So, for example, in nearly 90% of our offshore marine protected areas in the UK, you can still bottom trawl. Now, bottom trawling is one of the most destructive forms of fishing because you're not only taking all the marine life in there, but you're disturbing the seabed itself, thus releasing a lot of that stored carbon that I was talking about earlier. So, that's madness. And we're pursuing the UK government pretty vigorously on that. We're also really challenging governments, as in particular around fishing over scientific advice. So just taking more stocks than scientists recommend in order for those stocks to replenish. And that's also madness because not only are you emptying the seas of the all-important life, but you're actually damaging the future of the fishing industry because they will have fewer stocks to fish in future. So it's, very short term, very silly. And I guess the final area of policy that we're really focusing on is around inequity. So there's a big human cost to overfishing around the world. A lot of, for example, the west coast of Africa is being horribly overexploited. And that means that people who want to carry out subsistence fishing have nothing to catch. But that inequity is a global problem. The people who work on the big industrial scale fishing vessels have, frankly, horrible life. A lot of them are, really having their human rights impacted and no one knows about it. But there's a way in which subsidies are being misdirected so that small-scale fishers are, really struggling to pay their way, whereas the very shady owners of the big fishing companies and big fishing vessels are benefiting from subsidies paid by taxpayers, by you and me, and everyone is actually supporting these very destructive large fishing operations to carry out their work. So that's another area of policy that we're really focused on at Blue Marine.
What about businesses? So a lot of my audience are heads of sustainability or sustainability managers, responsible business managers. How can businesses get involved, and what can they do to be more supportive?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, because of all the sustainable development goals, I think number 14, life below water, is one that's quite intangible for a lot of businesses to support. And so I would say this as the CEO of Blue Marine, but I would say, have a partnership with Blue Marine. We love corporate partnerships. We need money in order to exist, but we can, give a lot of in return in terms of profile and impact, which I think a lot of businesses are very kind of keen on hearing about. Yeah. So, that would be my sort of catch-all, unless we're talking about a business that, for example, does a lot of shipping or something, and then we can talk about issues like noise reduction or speed reduction or whatever. But or a business involved in fish. But for businesses in general, I would say partner up with NGOs,
Yeah. And what about, have you got any upcoming projects that you're particularly excited about?
So many. I mean, we're working in now 25 different countries around the world, and in all of those places we're carrying out fantastic work. So in order to try and kind of give you a glimpse, I might just talk about kind of a couple. So we've got a big restoration project taking place in the Solent off the south coast of the UK. And we're working in partnership with lots of other NGOs down there. But this is a whole ecosystem restoration project where we're putting back oysters, which are a keystone species that encourage lots of other species like seahorses who like to live among them. We're putting back seagrass and bird nesting sites. And it's a huge and ambitious project. And I think it has a huge amount of potential. So we're very excited about that. And then another project that we're really very fired up about is getting more protection on the high seas, because there are these amazing areas in the high seas, including somewhere called the Walvis Ridge, which is off the west coast of South Africa, and the Sargasso Sea up near Bermuda. And these are kind of incredible breeding grounds for huge ranges of species. And if we could get these areas that are beyond national jurisdiction protected, then that would just be kind of a thrilling achievement. So we're working with other major international NGOs like Greenpeace to try and get that done. And it's hard because of the complexity of international jurisdiction, but we'll keep at it.
Wonderful work, really, truly. I think you're very lucky to work in such an amazing organisation, and congratulations on all the work that you do and the difference that you're making to the world. I really, really appreciate your time and your inspiration and education. I've learnt so much through just this short conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting it out there. And I'll tag the website just for the podcast is
bluemarinefoundation.com.
There we go. And I'll make sure that I tag it and people can get in contact and if they want to work with you and support you. But I really, really appreciate your time, and congratulations on everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I am very lucky to have the job I have. It's thrilling, and I learn a lot every day as well. And luckily I work with people who understand things far more than I do.
Yeah, beautiful. Have a really lovely day. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.